You ever sit at a dinner table full of people who think they know exactly who you are, but have no idea what you've done? That was me. Thanksgiving. Long oak table, candles flickering, expensive wine flowing like the truth never could. My uncle raised a glass. To Danny, he said, the face of the family's future. Laughter. Applause. Even my mom clapped. Danny smiled like a man who'd just invented gravity. No one mentioned the winter before, when the bank nearly took the house. When I quietly transferred $84,000 from my savings, just so the mortgage wouldn't eat what was left of my family's legacy. No one remembered the late nights in that freezing garage when I built the prototype system that Danny now pitched as his own. I didn't speak, didn't toast, just passed the mashed potatoes with a smile. Because when your name's erased from the story, you learn to write your own ending. And mine started right there, in that silence. It started with letters, thin white envelopes from the bank, stacked on the kitchen counter like unpaid guilt. I still remember the first time I opened one. I didn't panic, I didn't scream, I just stared at the number, and something in me cracked open. Not like glass, more like an engine, breaking loose from rust. Because I wasn't broken, I was just quiet. And they mistook that silence for surrender. But I was building something, in the cold, in the dark, in a rented storage unit at the edge of town. The kind of place people drive past without a second thought. And that was the point. Let them forget me. Let them laugh. They didn't know I had just sold the truck. And they sure as hell didn't know what I was building with that money. It was supposed to be just another Monday. Cold, gray. The kind of morning where the coffee never hits right. I walked into the factory with steel toes, grease on my sleeves, and a stale donut from the gas station still sitting in my mouth. At 9:13 a.m., I got the tap. You know the one. 2 fingers on the shoulder, soft like bad news. HR was waiting. The lady didn't even look up from the papers. Said words like restructuring and budget shift and not your fault. She even smiled while she said it, like she was handing me a balloon, not a pink slip. I'd worked there 9 years, taught half the shop how to run the CNC, worked through flu season, blizzards, a broken wrist, but none of that made it into the spreadsheet. Just numbers now. Too old, too expensive, too replaceable. I walked out carrying a cardboard box, with a coffee-stained mug, a bent wrench, and a tiny cactus my manager gave me 2 Christmases ago. That was my birthday. Nobody knew, except the calendar on my cracked phone screen. I drove home without the radio, wind howling through the cracked window like it was mocking me. And when I got to Mom's place, yeah, I'd been crashing there to save rent. She barely looked up from her game show. "So," she said, chewing on peanuts, "you gonna start applying somewhere, or what?" No hug, no cake, no, "I'm sorry," just the world, asking for productivity, even when all I wanted was 5 minutes to feel like a person. But I didn't say anything, didn't yell, just went out to the porch and stared at that old Chevy truck parked under the dying maple tree. And for the first time, I didn't see a memory. I saw an asset. The house smelled like cinnamon and judgment, turkey in the oven, laughter in the living room, and that low-grade tension that always hangs in the air when people love each other, but only conditionally. I brought rolls, the kind you bake from a can. No one touched them. Danny walked in 10 minutes late, flashing that startup smile like he'd just bought the whole block. New watch, new coat, new story to tell. He didn't even notice the truck was gone from the driveway. Big things coming, he said. We've got VC interest, probably going public next year. The room erupted like he'd just cured something, and then eyes turned to me. So, you doing okay? Someone asked. The kind of okay that really means, are you still unemployed? Still irrelevant? I said I was working on something small. Online, nothing big. They nodded politely, then turned back to the champagne. I didn't correct them, didn't hand out business cards or pitch a plan, because they didn't really want to know. Not about long nights in a cold garage, not about spreadsheets and shipping labels, and how I'd started studying AutoCAD tutorials like they were gospel. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a label. And if you don't have one they can brag about, they write you off. So I let them, smiled, chewed a stale dinner roll, and looked around the table like I was the only one who knew. This was going to be the last Thanksgiving they got to feel superior. It was just metal. That's what I kept telling myself as I walked across the gravel lot. Just an old Chevy pickup, dented fenders, busted tailgate, paint peeling like it was trying to let go first. But it wasn't just metal. It was Saturday morning oil changes with a radio humming in the background. It was hands that knew how to fix things, even when the world felt unfixable. He taught me how to drive in that truck, how to shift gears on a hill without stalling, how to listen to an engine. Really listen. After he passed, I couldn't bring myself to move it. It just sat there in the yard, like a rusted monument to everything we used to be. But you can't build a future on sentiment. Not when rent's due. Not when opportunity looks like a storage unit, and your only startup capital's a vehicle nobody drives anymore. So I took photos, cleaned the interior, cried once, quickly, then listed it online. The guy who bought it didn't ask any questions. He handed me $12,000 in $100 bills and drove off like it was just another transaction. I stood there a long time after the dust settled, hands in my pockets, no dramatic music, no closure, just silence. Then I opened my phone and made a payment on the 6-month lease for unit number 39 at Westfield Storage. 1,200 square feet of concrete, a flickering light, and enough space to disappear. Perfect. The place smelled like concrete dust and old rain. Unit number 39 sat at the very end of the row, half its overhead bulb flickering like it couldn't make up its mind. No insulation, no heating. Just 4 cinderblock walls, a roll-up door, and silence thick enough to breathe in. Perfect. I unloaded the first batch of tools from my trunk, a used welding rig, a second-hand vise, and a folding table that looked like it had seen a few garage sales. Every noise echoed, like the room was reminding me I was completely alone. But I wasn't scared. I was calm. There's a certain kind of peace that only shows up when no one's watching. I started laying out the blueprints I'd been sketching on the back of junk mail. Modular brackets, custom axle guards, restoration-grade mounts for vintage trucks that most shops wouldn't touch. Stuff only a real mechanic would care about. Stuff my dad would have obsessed over. I worked under that stuttering light until my fingers cramped. Slept in the backseat of my car when it got too late to drive home. Ate gas station sandwiches and washed my hair in the bathroom sink next to the vending machine. No one knew where I was. No one cared. And for once, that worked in my favor. Because this wasn't some passion project. This was survival, done in steel and silence. And even though I didn't have a logo, a loan, or anyone to pitch to, I had something better. A lock on the door, a plan in my head, and no one left to disappoint. Every night, after the rest of the world went quiet, I was in that box of concrete and ghosts, mapping out what they said I'd never build. Not a business, not a legacy, a blueprint for something better than both. Revenge that pays the bills. It started with brackets, the kind no one made anymore. Parts for old trucks with bodies out of production, but engines still willing to roar if someone gave them the chance. I dug through online forums, found gearheads begging for discontinued mounts, custom welds, adapters that no one sold. That's where I fit in. Not flashy, not loud, just necessary. I reverse engineered everything from scratch. Studied 3D modeling tutorials at 2 a.m., sketched on cardboard scraps and oil-stained paper towels. Mistakes came fast. Burnt metal, bad threads, warped steel. But I kept going, because every failure felt better than being safe and ignored. I wasn't trying to impress investors, wasn't networking at meetups or posting motivational quotes. I was alone, and that meant no noise, no interruptions, no sabotage. The world loves to interrupt women when they speak. It doesn't know what to do when they're silent and calculating. I didn't want a business to prove I mattered. I wanted leverage, something I owned, down to the last bolt. And if I played it right, by the time they realized what I was doing, they'd already be too late. That's the thing about working in the dark. No one sees you coming. The first time someone placed an order, I stared at the email for 10 minutes, just reading the name over and over. It felt surreal, like someone had reached into the dark and said, "I see what you're doing, and I want in." But I wasn't ready to be seen. Not yet. So I made a new name, a brand that sounded like a man, like a garage passed down through generations. Steadfast Steelworks. Strong, unassuming, American. I bought the domain, built the site myself, nothing fancy. Just clean, sharp photos on a black background, taken with the cracked camera on my old phone. No bio, no about me. No smiling founder in a blazer, talking vision and synergy. Just product, precision, performance. And the orders came in slow, then faster. Mostly small shops in Texas and Kentucky, guys with grease on their knuckles, and old trucks waiting for a second life. They had no idea a woman in Ohio was hand fabricating the parts in a storage unit, between vending machine dinners and portable heater fumes. And that was fine, because I wasn't chasing applause. I was chasing freedom. There's something powerful about being underestimated. When people think you're small, you get to move in ways they never expect. And when you're invisible, you don't need armor, just strategy. So I stayed quiet. Let the name do the talking. Let the work prove the rest. And in the shadows of that steel-framed alias, I started building more than just parts. I was building control. It was 1:42 a.m. My back ached from leaning over the workbench for 12 straight hours. The heater had gone cold, and my fingers were stiff from the February chill that crept through the cracks in the storage unit walls. I was mid-weld, goggles on, sparks flying, when I heard the buzz. Phone screen lit up. 3 new orders, then 5, then 12. I thought it was a glitch. Refreshed the page, refreshed again. Nope, they were real. 17 new orders in one night. 4 states. Almost $2,000 in revenue. Before sunrise. I sat down on the floor, gloves still on, and just let it sink in. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in months, I felt weightless. Rent for that unit, $385, which meant every part I touched from now on wasn't just a project, it was power. Not the kind you brag about at Thanksgiving, not the kind that fits in a resume box, but the kind that lets you sleep a little easier, knowing no one can take this from you. I didn't call anyone, didn't post about it, didn't celebrate on Instagram. I just looked around that dusty unit, concrete floor, walls stained with time, and whispered, "Let's go." Because in a world that never gave me permission, I'd finally carved out a space that didn't ask for any. And that space was profitable. Same table, same candles, same people asking the same questions, with wine-warmed smiles and eyes that scanned for weakness like it was tradition. The turkey was dry this time, or maybe it was just the silence between every bite. He showed up late again, my brother, buttoned down crisp, blazer tighter than last year, still talking in bullet points. This time it was different, though. He wasn't just prepping for an IPO. He was in talks with Bloomberg, making waves, bringing the future to market. And just like clockwork, the room lit up, clinking glasses, proud nods, even a tear from Mom. And then, the turn. "So, how's the little project going?" someone asked me, in that voice that sounds like they care. But mostly, they're hoping it's still small enough not to matter. I took a sip of water, wiped my hands on the napkin, said, "Still building?" They nodded, distracted. Forks scraped plates. Conversation shifted before I even swallowed. No one asked what I meant by building. Not one question. Not about logistics. Not about customers. Not about the damn freight contract I had signed 2 nights earlier. Because in their minds, I was still stuck, still figuring it out, still the girl who sold her truck because she was broke. And that's when it hit me. They weren't cruel. They were just comfortable with the version of me they didn't have to respect. I smiled, cut into my turkey, and thought, this is the last time they'll ever see me like this. But they won't know it until I'm gone. It came just before midnight. I was in sweats, sitting on the floor of my unit, eating cold fries out of a takeout bag, finalizing a parts diagram that had taken me 3 straight nights to get right. The phone buzzed. Caller ID, Danny. Which was weird. He never called, just texted. Mostly group chats, mostly smug. I let it ring twice before answering. Not out of spite, just to remind myself I could. His voice was tight. You could hear it in the way he said, "Hey," like the wind had just been knocked out of him. But he didn't want to admit it. "Do you know anything about this company called Steadfast Steelworks?" I kept my face still, like he could see it. Didn't answer right away. "They're undercutting us," he said. "Every bid, every supplier. They've got parts we can't even prototype until next quarter. Custom, niche, built for vintage models. Who the hell even makes that stuff anymore?" There was panic under his performance. And not the good kind. The kind that tastes like rust and regret. I asked, "Why are you calling me?" He hesitated. "Because you know this space. You used to work on that stuff. And I thought maybe you'd heard something." And I said, "Haven't heard a thing. Good luck, though." He thanked me, hung up. I looked around the storage unit, quiet, lit by the buzz of a single overhead light. Then I went back to work. Because the truth is, you don't have to swing the axe when the tree's already rotting from the inside. The next morning, the table was full again. Leftovers reheated. Cranberry sauce starting to crust at the edges of the bowl. Conversations looping in lazy circles like they always did. Vacations, stocks, someone's new kitchen backsplash. I sat at the end, quiet, sipping black coffee like it was armor. No one had any idea what had happened the night before, and I wasn't about to tell them. But I had something to show. I opened my laptop slowly, almost casually, the same way someone might unfold a napkin. Nothing flashy, no announcement, just a screen, and on it, a digital signature from a nationwide restoration supply chain, confirming a 6-figure contract with Steadfast Steelworks to manufacture a full line of custom retrofit components. 6 months of negotiations, 3 rounds of prototypes, 12 revisions, signed. I didn't say a word, just turned the screen a little, let it sit there, between the sweet potatoes and the gravy boat. At first, nobody noticed. Then my cousin leaned over, squinted, and the silence that followed was louder than applause ever could have been. Forks paused midair. Someone cleared their throat. Danny stared like the pixels were lying to him. "Wait, what is this?" he asked. I didn't blink, didn't brag, just said, "Something small. Online. Still building." I watched the recognition bloom across his face. Slow and uncomfortable. The kind of understanding that doesn't come with clarity, but with consequences. No one congratulated me. No clinking glasses. No raised voices. Just that quiet shift in atmosphere. When the room realizes the person they wrote off is the one holding the pen now. And for the first time all weekend, no one had anything left to say. Perfect. They thought that contract was the peak. A lucky break. A moment of maybe she's onto something. What they didn't know was that moment was already 6 months old. By the time they saw that screen, I'd already built a wait list 3 states long, already partnered with a machining firm in Michigan, already had a silent investor, a retired mechanic who saw my work online and sent a 5-word email. "You're the real deal. Let's scale." I didn't need validation from people who still saw me as between jobs. I had numbers, margins, a workflow. I had proof. And yet, I didn't feel triumphant. Not really. Because here's the truth no one tells you. When you finally win, the people who doubted you the most don't celebrate. They shrink. They get quieter. They avoid eye contact. They treat your success like a weather report they weren't ready for. And you realize something sharp. They were never rooting against you to be cruel. They just liked you better small. I stood in that room, same hardwood floors, same dusty chandelier, and felt like a stranger in my own bloodline. Not because I had changed, but because I'd stopped asking for space and built my own instead. I could have explained everything. The strategy, the scaling plans, even the name behind the name. But I didn't. Because they hadn't earned the right to that version of the story. The one where I wasn't behind, wasn't failing. The one where I'd already passed them miles ago. And now, I wasn't just building parts anymore. I was building distance. The morning after, the house was quiet. No more toasts, no more clinking forks, just coffee brewing and chairs scraping gently against the tile. I was standing out on the porch, wrapped in my old hoodie, watching the breath leave my lungs in slow, white clouds. The air smelled like frost and something else. Closure, maybe. The door creaked open behind me. He stepped out, footsteps hesitant. No swagger, no pitch, just silence. We stood there like strangers. The wind did most of the talking. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I didn't know," he said. I nodded. He tried again. "I mean, I didn't think you'd—" But he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have the words for what he was really trying to say. Or maybe he did. but they got stuck in the same part of the throat where pride and regret tangle. I didn't rescue him, didn't make it easy, just looked at the horizon, calm as ever, and said, "You weren't supposed to." And that was the truth. Because I never built this for applause, never chased the dream to prove anything to anyone. I built it because I had to, because no one else was going to save me. And in that moment, with frost biting my fingertips and silence pressing in around us, I realized something heavy and light all at once. I didn't need an apology, not from him, not from any of them. What I needed was already mine. Peace, earned, not given. They never sent flowers, never called just to check in, never once said, "We're proud of you." But every week, tucked between invoices and shipping confirmations, came something that felt closer to family than blood ever had. Emails, handwritten notes, even Polaroids of trucks brought back to life because of a part I'd shaped in the cold with burned knuckles and borrowed tools. One came from a man in Nebraska. Said his dad left him an old pickup before he passed. Said it sat in the barn for years until he found my parts, followed my diagrams, and turned the key on something that hadn't made a sound since 1998. "I didn't just fix the truck," he wrote. "I fixed something in me." I sat with that line for hours, didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted salt in my coffee. Another came from a woman in Idaho. Said she'd been passed over by every mechanic in town. Too custom, too niche, too much work. But now, her '84 GMC was running cleaner than it ever had. She drove it to her daughter's graduation. Said it felt like freedom. These people, they saw me. Not my resume. Not my last name. Just my work. And somehow, that meant more than anything that house full of relatives had ever tried to offer. So I kept every letter, every scrap of handwriting, filed them in a shoebox marked real, because sometimes the people who lift you up aren't in your family tree. They're just on the other end of a shipping label. The new space was nearly silent, but not the cold, lonely kind of silence. This was earned silence, the kind that comes after a war you didn't announce, but still won, 4 times bigger than Unit 39. Bright LED strips overhead, clean concrete floors that didn't flake under your boots. I walked the perimeter slow, fingers brushing the cool steel of the new shelves, lined with parts. Real inventory, not just prototypes duct taped together after midnight. My logo, my real one this time, hung from the back wall. Bold, black, unapologetic. No made-up story behind it. No fake garage, just the truth. A legacy I forged without permission. The new CNC machine sat in the center like a throne, leased with cash. No cosigner, no favors. I'd hired 2 guys from a nearby trade school. Both of them reminded me of who I used to be. Quiet, precise, underestimated. Now they clocked in every morning to a business built from the bones of doubt. And every time that overhead door rolled open and sunlight spilled in across the floor, I felt it. Not pride, not power, but clarity. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about showing myself what happens when you stop waiting for someone to hand you a place at the table and just build your own damn workshop instead. They once asked what I was doing with my life. This. I was doing this. I get asked sometimes. At trade shows, in DMS, by curious reporters who think there's a cute headline somewhere in my story. They want the angle. From jobless to CEO. Woman in a man's industry. They want the redemption arc, the juicy quotes, the soft piano music behind the pain. I always smile, politely decline, not because I'm shy, not because I'm ashamed, but because the people who needed to know already saw. And the ones who never believed, they wouldn't understand it now anyway. I don't talk about the nights I cried in my car because the welds kept cracking. I don't talk about the winter I couldn't afford heat and worked in fingerless gloves, breath fogging up my safety goggles. I don't talk about the silence that followed every family dinner where no one asked what I was really building. Because those things, the struggle, the resilience, the quiet kind of rage that fuels you long after the world stops looking, those are mine. Private, sacred, unmarketable. I could post more, could go viral, could milk the narrative for clicks and sponsors. But I don't, because I didn't build this to be seen. I built it to be free. And some victories don't need volume. Some stories don't need to be told to still leave a mark. There's a shelf in my new office. Simple, raw wood, the kind you don't notice until you really look. On it, a photo of him. Grease-streaked hands, proud half-smile, standing in front of the old Chevy. The truck we used to fix on weekends, back when time felt slower and the world didn't ask so many questions. Next to the photo, a folded receipt, the one from the day I sold it. I keep them side by side, not because I miss what I gave up, but because I know what it gave me. That sale was the first hard decision, the first time I chose my future over my comfort, over nostalgia, over clinging to a version of myself that no longer fit. I used to think legacy meant holding on to things, to people, to places that once mattered. But it doesn't. Legacy isn't about what you keep. It's about what you create when no one's watching and even fewer believe. Mine isn't shiny. It doesn't come with a plaque or a press release. It's steel. It's quiet orders processed at midnight. It's hands that ache but still move. It's knowing I built something honest in a world obsessed with image. And when I run my hand across that photo, when I see the light catch the crease in that faded receipt, I don't feel sadness. I feel alignment. I kept his lessons. Let go of the rest. Because sometimes the loudest way to honor someone is to move forward in your own name. They still don't get it. The ones who scroll past my name on a product label, never knowing who's behind it. The ones who said I was just figuring things out while I was building something they couldn't Google. And honestly, that's fine. There's a strange kind of freedom in being the shadow in the room, the one they forget to look at until the numbers start to shift and the balance tips in your direction. I once thought I had to explain myself, prove my value in conversations, wear success loud like armor. But being underestimated, it gave me time, privacy, room to experiment without commentary. They didn't see the night I filed my LLC, didn't hear the calls with freight brokers or vendors or my tax attorney, didn't know I'd been offered a buyout, 7 figures, didn't know I turned it down, because money's not the measure anymore. Control is, and the sweetest kind of leverage is the kind no one knows you're holding. You learn to move different when you know your name isn't what's making the sale. Your work is. And when someone says, "I didn't expect this to come from you," I just nod, because that sentence used to sting. Now, it fuels everything. So, let them underestimate. Let them overlook. Let them assume. I'll keep shipping parts and rewriting what success looks like. In silence, in steel, and completely on my own terms. If they've ever laughed at your silence, keep building. If they've ever called what you're doing cute, small, Just a side project. Keep going. Because here's what they never see: the late nights, the quiet failures you learn from in the dark, the way you stitch a business together out of grit, secondhand tools, and the version of yourself no one believed in but you. People like us, we don't get the spotlight. Not at first. We get passed over in meetings, talked over at tables, laughed at in rooms where our names don't echo yet. And still, we show up. We study. We sketch. We build behind garage doors and flickering storage unit lights. We learn how to carry the weight of doubt without letting it crush us. We learn that being underestimated isn't a disadvantage. It's cover. It lets us grow without interference, refine without noise, win without asking permission. So if you're there right now, if you're watching this from your own version of unit number 39, wondering if it's ever going to matter, wondering if you're crazy for trying, you're not. You're just early. And when it hits, when the first real order comes in, when the room that used to ignore you goes silent for once, you'll understand. Success doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be yours. So if this story hits somewhere deep, if you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever had to prove yourself in silence, if you've ever wanted to build a life no one saw coming, leave a comment. Tell me your story. Like this video. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Share it with someone who's grinding in the shadows and needs a reminder. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet doesn't mean lost. Quiet doesn't mean less. Sometimes it means unstoppable.